Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you some modeling modifiers in Autodesk 2019. So I'm going to go ahead and start by creating a a polygon primitive, and I'm going to scroll down here to gear. So I'm going to click on gear. I'm not going to worry about clicking the little settings box. This will come up with a whole bunch of stuff. You'll see sides, radius, yada yada yada. So I'm just going to show you a different way to do it, and it's a little bit easier unless you know exactly what you're going for. So again, that's create, polygon primitives, and then we're going to go to gear. Now I'm just going to tap F on my keyboard to zoom in on this object, and now under my poly gear under the attribute editor, I'm going to go ahead and change my sides. I'm just going to show you how some of these sliders work. So there's a number of different things we can do here, all which are in the settings box up here. So I can start by creating less or more gears, or sides if you will. I guess I'll go with 12, and then the radius, I can change the radius. Let me zoom out so you can see it a little bit better. You can see it gets larger and smaller. Okay. And we're starting to get a gear, and we really haven't done anything but a few clicks and a few slides. So internal radius, right? So if I make the radius even larger, now I can adjust the internal radius. The height, we can go ahead and adjust the height, and this is just a number of different sliders. Height divisions, so we don't need that many polygons here. Sometimes it's nice to just have one edge loop that runs around. So I'll leave it at 2 for now. And then gear spacing, now we can make them smaller or larger, right? And gear offset, we can set them to be larger or smaller. So this can be really useful for a number of different things. Gear tip, we can set them to be larger or smaller, right? I'll make mine look more like a gear. More like a gear. The gear middle, right? If I set it to 1, it should be the same as the tip. And then from here, I'm pretty good at the moment. Let me bring gear spacing, I don't know, something like that, and this I'd like to be a little bit shorter. And you can always, like I said, you can adjust the sides to it, right? And then we can even twist it. And in a feature like this, you probably want to make it taller, and you'll see it a little bit better. And I'm going to add more subdivisions, height divisions. And here, just it's a little bit easier. Now let's play around with the twist one more time. And you'll see you get a little bit of a twist on that, which is kind of neat, right? And then we've got taper, and we can taper it out, and we get this really cool little shape here, this little designed shape. So just to go over some of the attributes in here that we can kind of play around with, and then obviously you can adjust everything on here. So again, I'll make this 1. There we go. And I'm going to bring back down my twist to 0, and bring my taper to 0, or 1. There we go. So I've got a gear here, and I can adjust the height. I can use the scale tool, but I can also use this height tool, which is pretty cool. And this I'm going to just set to 2. And there's my gear. Okay. Now, super useful if you're building some kind of machinery, like I don't know, something that requires some engineering with twisting gears, bolts, whatever. So this is a great useful tool to sort of design up some quick instruments that you may need for some type of mechanical design. Now I'm going to go into other modeling modifiers that have not as much, that aren't as intricate as this one. However, they do serve extremely important purposes. So I'm going to make sure I'm in my modeling tab. And now what I'm going to do is go into create. And I'm going to create for this, I'm going to start with a cylinder. And I'm just going to scale this up. And probably just a little bit thinner. And change it to 90 degrees. And now I'm also going to bring it even smaller. I'm going to shift it over just so it doesn't interfere here. And I'm just going to make this a little bit longer. And then in my attribute editor, I'm going to go into my poly cylinder and I'm going to add my subdivision height to 20 sounds good. 25. Alright. So I've got my shape here, right? Just my cylinder. And I want to show you a really neat trick. So for this, I'm going to switch to my 4 viewports located right over here. Now that I'm in my 4 viewports, in my, let me shift this out of the way. Oop. In my side viewport, I want to show you, I'm going to press Control D and duplicate this once. And what am I at? Translate X is, or translate Z is 0.77. So I'm going to duplicate this one at negative 0.77. So now I know they're identical. It's not a great big deal if it's not, but it is kind of neat to show you that. Now I'm going to go ahead and just shift this one down and make this as sort of close as I can, and I'm just sort of creating this sort of like these pins, if you will, like bowling pins shape. So just using just Control D to duplicate, and if I want this one would be negative 0.383, negative 0.383, right? Something like that. And then I'll duplicate this one more time and just drag that up to about here. That's pretty good. Alright, so now we've got this sort of like log pileup. Have you ever seen like a truck, like a semi driving down with like a flatbed behind it with like tree logs or something, or piping or something? They usually have it stacked extremely similar to this. So now what I need to do is I need to highlight these. I need to select all these objects, everything except the gear in this case. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do I'm going to switch to my animation tab. And before I do anything in my animation tab, with all of my objects selected, I'm going to go to combine, which is this one right here. It's the 2 polyplanes with a circle around it. Combine, and just click it, and now it all becomes one solid object. Now I'm going to click on this object one more time, and in my Deform tab, clicking on my Deform tab, I'm going to scroll down to Nonlinear, and I'm going to go to Twist. Now, the first thing I'd like you to take note of, if I start messing around with this twist, if I go to my attribute editor and I go to twist 1 and I start to twist this, it twists really strange. It's almost actually like a bow tie now if you look at it. But we don't want this bow tie look. We want to make them all sort of twist together. So what I'm going to do is, just by highlighting my deformer here, my twist deformer, I'm going to rotate this, and this one is going to be rotated at 90 degrees. And you'll notice I get these circle caps sort of at each end because it matches the height of it. And now just by selecting just the deformer handle, the twist 1 handle, I'm going to switch into my attribute editor, and under twist I'm going to start messing around with start angle. And you're going to see this start to twist up. Now this is really cool. So let me show you that one more time. And the reason why this is so cool is because it gives you a lot of it can do so much for you so easily. So you'll notice I'm twisting it one way. At 0, it's completely straight. Now I'm twisting it back up. And you notice it just starting to twist up. And then I can, twist it a little bit more on this side and really get some strange twisting attributes on it. It also has a low bound and high bound. High bound starts at 1, so you can twist it at one point and have it, kind of untangle itself up to a certain point. And the same thing at -1. If I were to do this, I could stretch it out that way or bring it back and where the low bound starts. And by default, this sits at -1. So -1 to 1 is your range from the front to the back of the model, if you will. So for this, I'm going to keep it like so. And now I want to show you one more thing. So when you're totally happy with a model, and let's just say you've already unwrapped it and textured it and you modeled it like this, you want to keep it the same, right? You don't want to accidentally mess anything up on it. So what you will do at that point is just do Edit, Delete All by Type, and click History. And what that does is it deletes all of the information in here. I've talked about this in so many videos, but it's really important. And what we've basically done is we've just what is called baked down that information. We've just baked the information down. So now if I click on here on our gear, I can go ahead and I'm going to just zoom in on it real quick. And on my gear here, you'll notice that I don't have any of those attributes I can play around with anymore. So once you delete all on history, you will be also deleting the information, the deforming attributes that you were once able to do before you deleted all by history, just to keep that in the back of your mind. So that's really like the last thing you want to do when you're working in a scene. So it just bakes that information down. Now the next thing I want to show you is the bend modifier. And I'm going to start with a cylinder, and I'll just shift this one out of the way. And what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to again scale it up, or that's actually what I meant to do. I don't know, something like this. Alright. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my poly cylinder and I'm going to add subdivision height, and I'm just going to do 25 like I did with the last one. And now I've got this subdivision height. And I'm also going to scale this way. So now with this object selected, I'm going to do a deform blend shape. Oh, I'm sorry, deform, not blend shape. Deform nonlinear, and we're going to do bend. Now with the bend modifier, again, if this was sideways or any other direction, I'd have to modify it. But it is directly inside of this object. It doesn't have the cool little circular handles at the ends like the twist handle did. But that's okay. So if you ever do accidentally deselect it and you're like, oh my god, where my object went, you want to keep this directly in the center of it. So just by tapping 4 on your keyboard, enters wireframe mode. And I know it's still hard to see in there, but if you just sort of click on there, now you can see it. Where'd it go? There it is. You can see it directly in the center of it, and that's where you want it. Now, if you accidentally select off of it, you can just run a click and drag and highlight both of them, and then while holding Shift, just click on the end. Make sure you're not selecting the bend modifier accidentally. So all you're doing is deselecting the cylinder, and then you'll again have the modifier handle selected. I'm going to click on Bend 1, and in my Bend 1 here, my bend attributes, I'm going to start to curve this. And again, this is an awesome tool. You'll see it starts to curve really cool and cleanly. And I'm not doing anything. Like, I don't have to extrude and keep rotating and extrude up and then rotate and move and scale and rotate and move and scale and rotate kind of thing, like box modeling technique. This is just a super simple way to sort of quickly create something like this. Now, you could always just create a torus and then play around with the attributes in here to get this shape. So what makes this one unique is also, if I tap 6 on my keyboard, in my bend, if I bring this back just a little bit, you'll notice in here I still have the caps. So if I went ahead and did something like that, I would have to delete the caps to save on poly count and things like that. But we won't get into that right now. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to keep this at 180 degrees, but on my low, on my low bound, I'm going to bring this out, and now I have this candy cane shape, right? So pretty cool. And also, if I change this to 90, I get a shape that does this sort of curvature thing. And if I wanted it to be a more harsh curve but keep that sort of bend, I could make it at 180 and then use a combination of skills. I could hold right click on here and go to face, and then simply just delete these faces, and then I'd be right there. So now that I've got that done, I want you to try and go ahead and do this, because I want you to combine modeling techniques along with using the modifier. So in this particular case, I want you to make your candy cane just look just like this, right? So using your bend modifier here, you can change it, to whatever, and it will go all the way up to 360 apparently. But for this case, we're just going to make it 180 because we want to keep that sort of subtle, slight hard curvature. And then I'm gonna, before I even do anything else, because the modifier might start to get a little weird, it is possible. It is always a safe bet to do edit, delete all by type, and history. Now, also, if you just wanted to, do it for this item here, these objects, you can do edit, delete by type, history. So this way, you're only doing it for this object and not every other object in the scene. Just an FYI. Now I'm going to select my little candy cane shape again. I'm going to hold right click and I'm going to go to face. And this time, I'm going to click and drag and highlight and just delete these faces up until this one. I'm also going to grab my vertex tool and I'm going to press R, or I could select my edges, holding right click, double click these edges, and then using R to scale, I'm just going to scale these flat. You see that? I'm just going to scale these flat. And these are some really useful techniques, especially when you're beginning to model, because you can just flatten out edges, vertices, whatever, on the fly really quickly. So now that I've got that done, I want to sort of rehash some of the things we've done. So we're going to duplicate this object, and we're going to rotate it, and then we're going to combine it and merge the vertices so we have one closed object. So the next thing we want to do with this object is, I always find it easiest to hold D and V, and I'm just going to adjust my pivot point to, you'll notice how my my scale handle in this case is perfectly level let me do plus, is perfectly sort of parallel, if you will, or directly equivalent as far as angle goes, right here on the edge. And my pivot point here now, with that being at that point, I'm going to press Control and D. And in my channel box now, I want to do a scale X -1. But I can't do that yet because it's not going to work right. So before I do that, I need to do Modify and Freeze Transformations. And in here now, under Scale X, I believe it's going to be X, we're going to do -1. Yep. And that'll all depend. It could be -Z or -X depending on your axes, on how you built it. Even -Y if you built it like horizontally. Anyway, so now that I've got that done, I'm going to hold Shift and click, and I need to merge these because, first I need to combine these because they're separate objects, and then I need to merge them because there's no faces in here. And on top of that, if I tap 3, won't do it yet because they're not the same object, but I'm going to select both of them and I'm going to combine them. And now if I tap 3, You can't really see the marking, but there is sort of this little pinch here, as you've seen with the sword, the shield, when we were sort of fixing those up. Now that I have that all set, you'll notice if I go into face mode and I just click on this, it's going to highlight just that one object. Same thing with every closed object that's one thing. If I double click this one, it's going to select every single face on here because it's one entirely closed object, where this one is not. So now that I have sort of figured out, okay, this isn't a completely closed object yet, if I hold right click and go to vertex, I'm going to run a click and drag over these. Oop, just zoom in on them, tapping F. And now that I've got all of these vertices selected, you have to run a click and drag over both of them. I want you to hold right click, shift and right click, merge vertices, merge vertices. So that's hold shift, hold right click, merge vertices, and merge vertices. You can't do a merge vertices to center because it'll merge them directly to the center. Now, the easiest way to test to see if this actually worked or not is to move one of the verts around, and if it's all good, you won't see two verts not merged. So basically one vertex would stay here while you move the other one. So if you just click once instead of a click and drag and they all move together, that means they're merged properly. And just to rehash over some of these, I'm going to click and drag and highlight over this. I'm going to hold shift and right click and go merge vertices. And then I'm going to go to merge vertices again, except I'm going to go to the little check box right next to it. So the little settings box right next to it. And in here you can change the threshold. So we've covered this already, but I have mine at 0.00001, and that's because I know that it's one object. I know that the vertices that I'm merging are directly on top of each other. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They're not 0.00001 off or 0.1 off. There's a very small chance that they don't merge. And the reason why you do that, have a very small threshold, is because you don't want to accidentally merge any vertices like these. If I were to do merge vertices to center, you'll see I get a whole bunch of stuff merging, and that won't happen when you adjust your threshold at all. So now that I've done that, I've got a couple things in here. I can always do edit, delete all by type, and history. And I just want to show you one last thing before I sort of push forward. So this is a really neat tool. This is great for, like, rope would be awesome for this if you put a rope texture on here, or like steel sort of cable wrapping around something. Just whatever objects you can think of that have this sort of twist. Rope and steel cable and whatever type of cables are a great one. So if I just pretend like I have this hoisted up on a ceiling, right? Or whatever. A ceiling will work. I can do a couple other things to this that are going to make it really neat. So I'm going to click on my little P cylinder here, and I'm going to press minus to bring down the size of my tool. Oop. I don't know what button I just accidentally pressed, but you can always check down here on my keyboard. So I'm going to select this object again, and I'm going to rotate this at 180. So now that it's upside down, and then I'm also going to rotate it at 90. And now I'm going to go ahead and just bring this up, and I'm just going to pretend that this is like being hoisted. This is like stapled or something to a ceiling, right? Or bolted into a ceiling. This is a great little thing for like sci-fi scenes or something, where you have like these cables running through the ceilings or walls, with all that type of electricity stuff. And I'll just go ahead and bring this here. I can even make this smaller, sort of tighten it up so it's got like a tighter grasp around these cables here, right? And now I'll just put one in like 3 spots. I'll put one like here, and I'll do, you know what? Let me show you one more trick. Instead of pressing Control D, if you press Shift D and then shift over, what you just did is duplicated with transform. So now if I press Shift D one more time, you'll see that I've got it. Will automatically Shift D, it retains that information, and it will go the same exact distance, or whatever you do, over that course of time. So let me show you one other example while I'm at it. And this will be one of the requirements in the lab. So I'm just going to use my gear for instance here. And I'm going to press Control D for the first one, because I'm going to leave that one in the center. And then I'm just going to put this one here. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to hold D and hold X. And I'm going to snap this directly to the grid point. So D and X. So that'll be my pivot point. And what this is useful for is if I press Shift D now, if I press Shift D now and I rotate it from this point, I'll just go, let's see if I can do 45. 45 will work. So Shift D, and then I just Shift D all the way around. It's going to create a perfect circle of gears in this case, which is such a useful thing, especially if you're trying to create something in a circular shape, or go around the edge of a fence, a rounded fence, or a rounded wall, or I don't know, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be gears. It could be a polyplane, it could be cylinders, it could be polycubes, it could be whatever object you have. But that creates a really nice feature when you're trying to do something intricate like this. So anyway, I'm going to come back here, and just to show you with these just few little tricks that I've shown you, I'm just going to hold V and snap this to the center here. So it's going to be, if I shading wireframe unshaded, if I show you, it's snapped directly to this center point on my cylinder of this modifier here. I'm just going to scale this down and until it sort of just bleeds through, and it gives it some kind of casing at the back end of it. And now I can just Control D and snap these, holding V directly into place on all of these. Control D, holding V, and I might have to zoom in, and I'm snapping it. Instead of snapping it here or over to one of these verts, I'm going to snap it directly to the center here. And it just gives you some really easy ways to sort of build these manufactured type of things with the Shift D and the snapping. Let's do here, and I'm going to snap this right here. And now that I've got that done, it's just like a, let me turn shading and wireframe unshaded. Off. It's just that these objects now are they're looking really neat, but there we go. And I'm just trying to make it look like this is suspended in air, as if, let's just put a polyplane as my ceiling and rotate it. And if this were my ceiling, right? Just to give it like a little bit more context, just to show you what I mean. You can see here, I always have the tops of any object sort of just bleed through. And, oh, did I not need to do that? Let's do 180. There we go. So now you can see that this object is sort of just suspended by this. This is the ceiling of my object, so if I threw like a ceiling texture of, you know, maybe a drop ceiling, I don't know, whatever, some kind of panel ceiling or something, and then I have these sort of bolted with these gears to the ceiling, and I have this steel cable or rope or whatever. The last thing I want to show you, and this was just to give it some context on where these tools could be useful, is if I take this cable now that it's sort of suspended by these tie hangers or joist hangers or whatever you want to call it, cable hangers or staples or whatever, if I click on here, I want to show you one last trick, and this is a really useful tool, and I've shown you this with the shield, but I'm going to show you once more where it can be useful. If I hold right click and I go to vertex and I just highlight these vertices and I tap B on my keyboard, that toggles on soft select mode. So you'll see it right here. Soft select mode is on. Tap B to turn it off. On, off, on, off. So holding B and left click and sliding left or right on my mouse is going to adjust the size of this. So I'm going to make it just about here. And what this does is just sort of gradually shifts these vertices. And this will work in edge mode also. So maybe I grab both of these. I'm just selecting these 2 rows, and I'm just going to sort of gradually drag it down just a little bit. And that's just to give it this sort of believability that it's actually being assisted by being held with this object. And then I could, take the end caps and make this smaller actually. Just sort of give it this, you get the idea. So now it looks like it's actually sort of hanging a little bit more than it normally would have if it were just going straight across. So anyway, that's all I've got for you in this video. I'd like you to use the Shift duplicate, Shift D, and rotate it. It doesn't have to be the gear, it can be any object, in a circular shape by rotating it. So you're going to have to adjust your pivot point to the center of somewhere, and then just Shift D it around, right? The other thing you need to make sure you use the bend modifier here, create a gear, and create this shape here. And these are just this entire bend modifier. It's just adding on to a skills set that you already learned with the shield. So it's just adding on to your toolbox basically. You've got we've already covered combining objects, we covered merging vertices, toggling face, edge, vertice modes, rotating, changing pivot point, and things like that. So anyway, if you do have any questions, be sure to shoot me a message, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, thanks for watching.